inevitable. I'm Steve.
Hey friends, I've spent several videos now answering the greatest question of the modern age. How powerful is Minecraft Steve? And I'm doing that by going through every little aspect of the game in exhausting detail. Watching the rest of the series isn't necessary to understand this video, but if you're interested, it'll be linked at the end and in the description. So far, we've been focusing on how much he can lift and trying to construct the heaviest possible inventory for Steve. In the first video, I wrote a formula to determine the uncompressed volume of a water source block and used that to estimate the mass as around 2 quadrillion kilograms. From there, we filled sponges up with 118 sources apiece, threw stacks of them in bundles, dyed them, threw those in shulker boxes, dyed those, and then just last episode, we figured out how to make the heaviest armor possible. This time, I want to handle some popular suggestions that the comment section has been on about for a while now. Most of them are relatively small, but one is absolutely massive. Let's start by revisiting Steve himself. In this video, I estimated Steve's weight by analyzing his clothes, studying how they'd be manufactured, and then calculating his volume and assuming he has the average density of your average human. But, as a lot of people pointed out, I never accounted for things like his socks, underwear, hair, genitals, or some other things. And on top of missing all of that, with all the crazy feats Steve is capable of, it's probably not safe to assume that he still has a normal human density. So, instead of doing it piece by piece with all his clothes and body parts, let's try another, more all-encompassing method. We've used this formula to figure out the masses of a few things already, so let's give that a try. This is an equation I derived from the formula for terminal velocity, so now it uses terminal velocity to determine mass. Said velocity, along with the gravitational acceleration, can both be found on this chart that explains Minecraft's very weird, inconsistent gravity. But the rest of the variables are trickier. Rho here is the fluid density of the air in Minecraft, which I calculated last time to be an incredibly thick 398 kilograms per cubic meter, so that's easy at least. A is the cross-sectional area of Steve that air will hit as he falls. To find that, first we look at him from the bottom, something like this, where we can see the bottom of his legs, arms, and parts of his head. To measure this shape, we can break it down into 3 squares, his arms with a side length of 4 pixels each, and his head with a side length of 8 pixels. Before I convert that to meters, we need to figure out Steve's pixel scale. As commenter Josenobi3022 pointed out, last time I covered Steve, I made the mistake of assuming that the pixels on his texture are the same size as pixels on blocks. But that's not true. Steve is 32 pixels tall, exactly the count of 2 blocks, but while 2 blocks are 2 meters tall, Steve only measures in at 1.8 meters. Doing some simple math, we find that the length of a single Steve pixel is a little under 0.06 meters. Using that to convert our measurements, calculate the areas of our squares, and add them up, we get Steve's cross-sectional area as 0.304 meters squared. That leaves only one variable, the coefficient of drag. If you've seen the rest of the series, you might know that drag coefficients have been the bane of my existence, and are largely the reason I didn't try to weigh Steve like this before. Last episode, when I was weighing armor, I even made a joke about the fundamental law of aerodynamics being that drag coefficients are dumb. It was hilarious, and everyone laughed. But now, instead of trying to go around it, it's about time I faced my rival head-on. My first thought was that mysterious drag variable on our gravity chart. I haven't paid it much mind so far because the way it's used in Minecraft's velocity formula, shown here, doesn't match either the drag coefficient or the drag force, meaning it probably doesn't represent drag in the same way that conventional physics does. But, since it is a known variable used in the Minecraft velocity equation, if I can figure out what it does represent, it might still be helpful. First off, since that's the formula for velocity of an object in freefall in the Minecraft world, here's the one for our world. Don't worry too much about the hyperbolic tangent, all you need to know is that as t gets bigger, this whole thing gets closer to 1, canceling this term and giving us that terminal velocity equation from earlier. To figure out what the drag variable represents, we need to set these equations equal to each other, and we have a few different ways we could do that. My first thought was to solve both equations for time, since that's a variable they share, and then use that consistent variable to set them equal to each other. Solving the Minecraft equation for t gives us this. When we try to solve our real-life equation for t, though, we get this absolute mess, because trigonometry is stupid. If you want to save yourself from dealing with all that, the other thing we could do is what I would have probably thought of first if I tried to solve it when I had slept in the past 36 hours. We could realize that these two equations are already set to the same variable, the velocity, and that trying to solve for another one would be a waste of time and effort. Oops. Now that I have slept, I realized something else important too. We can't actually compare these equations at all. The units are all wrong, and in some cases that wouldn't be a big issue, we could just divide t by 20 to convert from ticks to seconds. But, and this might be a big shock to some people, Minecraft is not real life, and this formula doesn't follow the fundamental rules of real-life physics equations. It might not be obvious that there are rules like that at all, but when it comes to equations where some variables have units, there are certain things that we can't do with those variables. For an easy example, these units don't even out to be meters per tick like they should, since that's the unit for velocity. But also, we have an exponent with units, and we have drag, which might have units, being subtracted from a coefficient that doesn't have units, and none of those things are valid if you're trying to write an equation that makes any sense at all in a physics context. In fact, those problems are so big that I don't think we should use this equation to figure out Steve's weight. I did originally have a whole section here where I set up a system of equations to solve for the drag coefficient and mass. The drag variable went nowhere, if you're wondering. But some of it was kinda hard to explain concisely, again because trigonometry is stupid. And also, ignoring the clear problems with how the equations even work to begin with is a bit much, even for my standards. On to plan B. I wanted to try something that could plausibly count as a real analysis instead of the insane ramblings of someone who's spent full days of his life watching things fall down in Minecraft. So, I downloaded CAD, a modeling and testing software for engineering, relearned how to use it after many wonderful years of not thinking about it, recreated the Minecraft player model, and set up a computational fluid dynamics, or CFD simulation, using some of the properties of Minecraft air that we've already calculated. We don't have everything. I did have to make some assumptions. For instance, I set a lot of the thermal properties of Minecraft air as similar to those of regular Earth air, which is kind of a stretch with how thick air is in Minecraft. But if it was too different, a lot of the biomes and ecosystems we see on both Earth and on the Minecraft planet wouldn't exist. So I think it's a safe assumption, better than all that stuff before at least. Running my simulation, we get the estimated drag coefficient of Minecraft Steve when falling upright as around 1.35, which is barely different than a normal human. Meaning, I probably could have gotten away with not doing any of this. Oh good. Back to our mass equation, plugging in our last variable lets us finally determine that Steve's real mass is 15,678 kilograms, which, in Earth gravity, would make him weigh 15,678 kilograms, which is 154 kilonewtons, 35,000 pounds, or 13 2,500 elantras. So, all those people saying his muscles should be denser, maybe they were onto something. Importantly, since Minecraft players always fall at the same speed, that means both the cape and different player skins don't make a significant difference. That'll be important for later. It also technically means the inventories don't matter, but shut up about that. Now that we understand the sheer magnitude of Steve's godlike physique, let's stab him with some stuff. The next suggestion is arrows. You know how sometimes after you fight a bunch of skeletons, you look like this for a while? Well, like all these people mentioned, those arrows have weight. First, we need to figure out what the maximum number of arrows we can keep stuck into Steve is, because they do disappear after a while. After some basic testing, we already have a problem. The amount of time it takes arrows to disappear off of player models isn't always the same. And that's an issue because there's a lot of variables that could be at play. Is it based on the number of arrows? Is it based on random ticks? Is it different if there are more players on the server? This is Mark, by the way. Everyone say hi, Mark. Because of all that, I'm going to do something I've avoided doing so far in the series. I'm going to check the source code to figure out what's going on. So I decompiled Minecraft, and according to the user agreement, I'm allowed to look through the source code, but I'm not allowed to distribute it, and I'm not sure if showing it on video counts as that, so forgive the censorship. What I found is that all living entities track arrows stuck in them, even though only players display them. And I also found that the amount of time an arrow takes to disappear is based on the total number of arrows, but it isn't individual to each arrow. Let me explain. When you get stuck with an arrow, a timer is set to 20 times the quantity of 30 minus the number of arrows already in you. It counts down in ticks, and when it hits 0 or below, one arrow disappears, and the timer resets using however many arrows are in you now. Meaning, a single arrow should take 29 seconds to disappear, but if you have 29 or more arrows, one will disappear every single tick until you have 28 arrows left. But while the timer is running, new arrows don't reset it until it runs out. That means the maximum number of arrows we can have will be however many we can stick in Steve in those initial 29 seconds, since that's the longest the timer will ever be. After being hit with an arrow, Steve has 10 ticks of invulnerability, during which arrows bounce right off. So, it seems like we can get, at most, 2 arrows per second, or 58 arrows in 29 seconds. And then on the same tick that there would be a 59th arrow, they start disappearing at 10 times the rate we can gain them. Full disclosure, there is something weird going on with that timer. Most of the time, arrows disappear exactly like I stated above, to the tick. But while testing, sometimes when there was only a handful left, they persisted a lot longer than I predicted. It isn't super relevant to the video, since no matter what I did, I couldn't get more than 58 arrows stuck at a time. But if anyone's more familiar with the source code and knows what's going on, let me know, I couldn't figure it out. Now for how much each of them weigh, arrows have 3 parts: a feather fletching, a wooden shaft, and a flint arrowhead. A chicken feather, which is heavier than a parrot feather, maxes out at 0.4 grams, or 0.0004 kilograms, making it officially the least significant thing I've counted, and because of that, I will not be spending time figuring out how much of the feather is wasted. Next up is the stick. Normally, I'd assume it's conserved from its crafting recipe, since I don't really trust in-game models with how compressible everything seems to be, but that's how I weigh items, and since you can't pick up stuck arrows, they only exist as an entity, so let's measure the stick too. The length of my shaft here is 13 pixels, and the radius is 0.5 pixels. Assuming it's a cylinder, plugging both of those into this formula for volume gives us around 10.2 cubic pixels. But, since now I know I need to worry about pixel scales, despite being 16 pixels long, the arrow model is only about 14.5 block pixels long, meaning each arrow pixel is just slightly bigger than each Steve pixel, and meaning that if we convert the volume of the stick, it's a little under 0.002 cubic meters of wood. As I've gone over before, the heaviest wood in Minecraft is acacia wood. But, as commenter all28950 pointed out, when trying to figure out what kind of acacia wood we're dealing with, I landed on acacia puce, when the Hawaiian acacia koa tree matches our in-game tree a lot better. Good eye, friend. As far as density goes for our new acacia equivalent, the wood of the koa tree varies from a very light blonde wood to a very heavy darker wood. Since we have a vibrant red color on our acacia wood, we're probably somewhere in the middle of that range, like 640 to 960 kilograms per cubic meter. Taking the high end, that gives our stick a mass of about 1.8 kilograms. Not ideal for an arrow, but it's what we got. Finally, the arrowhead is complicated. Not because of the math, but because I don't know how to interpret the shape of it. If I rotate it, like I did when I assumed the stick was a cylinder, the arrowhead would be conical, and cone-tipped arrows do exist, usually for training in archery, but they look like this, they aren't wider than the shaft. Instead, it could be more like a 4-blade broadhead style arrowhead, but those are usually made out of steel, and the material properties of flint don't really let it be that thin. It could also be a regular flint arrowhead, but that doesn't look anything like the model. So there's 3 options, and all of them have issues. I'll be going forward with the flint arrowhead, but if you have any other ideas about it, let me know in the comments. Since it already doesn't fit the model, I'll just go with the historic weight of flint arrowheads, which is somewhere around 10 grams, giving our whole arrow a mass just barely more than the stick. Wonderful. When I was analyzing the source code, I did find 2 other important things. First, the counter used to time the disappearance of arrows is also shared for tridents. Bedrock players might know that sometimes when drowned throw tridents at you, they stick out of your player model like arrows. They don't render in Java Edition, but for whatever reason, they are still tracked, meaning if you get hit with a trident, it'll affect your arrow timer, and that's good enough for me. So, since the counter is shared between them, if tridents happen to be heavier than arrows, we'll end up using 58 tridents instead of 58 arrows. The other thing I noticed was about bees, more on that in a bit. Tridents are not made of a known material. Well, they might be prismarine, but that's not like a real known material. So, we'll have to lean back on Reliable to determine our mass. We've been through this already, so let's do it quickly. Grab the gravitational acceleration and the terminal velocity from the gravity chart, use the same fluid density, the cross-section is 1 by 5 pixels, and for once they are the same size as block pixels, meaning that translates to around 0.02 cubic meters. And then for the drag coefficient, I opened CAD again, which I would not recommend doing, ran the simulation again, and this time got 1.1. After plugging, and subsequently chugging through our formula, we get the Minecraft Trident with a mass of 121,880 kilograms, which would blow the arrows out of the water if it weren't for one thing: naming. Last video, we discovered that experience in Minecraft is incredibly heavy, especially if you do everything from a max level. While tridents can be enchanted, since they only stick in players when drowned throw them, they probably aren't enchanted at a max level. But since arrows from players do count, we could rename them at max level. A few quick things before I get into that. First, some people wanted to know why I was assuming that experience has mass to begin with, so here's the short version. XP, specifically in its pure orb form, has a few interesting properties. When in freefall, it's pulled on by the planet. When falling through air, it slows down due to drag and approaches a terminal velocity. When in water, it floats up, proving it experiences a buoyant force. And when traveling, it doesn't go at light speed. By our current understanding of physics, pretty much everything that has mass should have all of those properties, and pretty much everything without mass should have none of them. A few people thought it might be a high-energy massless particle, since those gain some of the properties of mass, but they don't really gain these ones. Fun fact though, boats for some reason don't experience drag when falling, so there is more evidence for boats being massless than there is for XP being massless. Anyway, we know from observing XP as it enters the experience bar that it's conserved between forms in pretty much all circumstances except when it's violently ripped away from its container as a player dies. Then, some of it gets destroyed. So from that, and without any further evidence as to how XP and magic work, I'm assuming that XP is also conserved when imbued into items unless it's violently ripped away from something like disenchanting. Since renaming items also costs XP, renaming should theoretically also add mass. Last video, I asked in the comments if renaming crafting materials should add the weight of the XP to the items crafted from those materials, or if crafting should count as an XP destroying event like dying. And a lot of people responded, thanks friends. As of the writing of this video, by my tally, 126 comments say yes, renaming crafting components should count, but 176 comments thought the opposite. Sorry to Team Yes. I was on your side, but I'm a man of the people. A lot of folks also said they thought renaming shouldn't count at all, which isn't what I was asking. Maybe I should have asked that actually. But there were enough people on Team No that said renaming does count, but only at the end, to turn the tide. So, renaming stays, but just once per item. While on the topic, I do have another question for you all regarding renaming items. I can rename a stack of 64 items, or I could rename 64 individual items with the same name, and they still stack. So, if I rename items individually and then place them in a stack after, does it add one level of weight and destroy the rest, or does it add 64 levels of weight? I can see it either way, so let me know what you think. For now, I'm going to assume the lower one, just so I don't have to make my big numbers smaller if that one wins, because that always sucks. Who wants small numbers? That being said, if we want to load Steve up with 58 renamed arrows, all it takes is 2 friends with bows to hold 58 unstacked, individually named arrows. In Java Edition, the single maximum level you can obtain, which is level 238,609,312, takes an insane 2 billion kilograms of XP to reach from the level right below it. That means that if we use that single level to rename an arrow, that arrow gains 2 billion kilograms of XP to go with the 1.8 kilograms of wood, making it just a bit heavier than the Trident. 58 renamed arrows, therefore, have a total mass of around 116 billion kilograms. Remember when I mentioned bees? Well, it turns out that while arrows and tridents have to share the same timer, there is a second one for bee stingers, which is weird since, as far as I can tell, nothing ever renders bee stingers. Well, except bees. But, since it's there, and since a few folks wanted me to cover it, let's give it a shot. The bee counter follows the exact same logic as the arrow one, meaning we're looking at the same maximum of 58 bee stingers at a given time. As for how much those stingers weigh, first we need to narrow down what kinds of bees these are, and for once, that's pretty easy. Bees in Minecraft produce honey, meaning they're probably honeybees. Let me know if I need to explain why. There are other kinds of bees that produce honey, but they're pretty obscure and tend to not look like this. Out of the honeybees, the main option that people usually think of is the western honeybee. It's the most domesticated and the most used. Bees within a single species also come in different types depending on their job, but that's also easy to narrow down because, even though there are other options, if you see bees outside the hive, they're almost guaranteed to be worker bees. And also Minecraft bees do all the worker bee stuff, like pollinating. Easy enough? The main problem is that Minecraft bees are massive. But even though there are big bees, none of them are that big, and none of them fit the look and behavior of Minecraft bees like western honeybees do. So I guess they're just really big honeybees. Normal honeybees from Earth on the large end can be around 15 millimeters long with a stinger that's 1.5 millimeters long and has an average thickness of 0.2 millimeters. Looking at our Minecraft honeybee, it's 10 pixels long and the pixels are the same size as block pixels. Can't believe I have to check that every time now. Meaning, the Minecraft bee comes in at 625 millimeters long, or 41.6 times the size of a normal honeybee. The model for the Stinger isn't super helpful, so assuming it's scaled up at the same rate, we'd expect the Minecraft Bee Stinger to be 62.5mm long with an average thickness of 8.32mm. Since that's the average thickness of the Stinger and not the thickness of the base or the tip, we calculate the volume as if it were a cylinder even though it's closer to a cone. Plugging everything in and working through it, we get 3,398 cubic millimeters, or a very small number of cubic meters. The material the Stingers are made out of is called chitin, which is a hard organic material that arthropods love to use. The density of chitin is around 1,425 kilograms per cubic meter, giving one Minecraft Bee Stinger a mass of 0.00485 kilograms, and giving 58 of them a mass of 0.281 kilograms. Remember when I complained about the mass of the bucket not mattering enough? This is what we're doing now. While I'm on the topic of chitin, let me quickly revisit shulker boxes, because, as commenter Vifty mentioned, it's also the most likely candidate for the material of shulker shells, which so far I've been ignoring. Shulkers only ever drop a single shell, which would imply that that's the entire shell, but the item texture looks like it's only half, and the shulker box, which is crafted with 2 shells, looks like it has as much shell as a single shulker mob. So, I think I'll consider a shulker box to weigh as much as 1 full shell plus the chest. The shell of a shulker appears to be 1 pixel thick, and the full shulker is 16 pixels on all sides, meaning the internal empty space is 14 pixels cubed. Shulker pixels are the same size as block pixels, meaning that internal space is about 0.67 cubic meters. The volume of the shell would therefore be 1 cubic meter, the size of the entire shulker, minus that empty space, for a total of 0.33 cubic meters, or 470 kilograms of chitin. The chest is 2 logs worth of wood, which we can recalculate using the density of our new acacia koa wood, thanks again to all28590, making our chest have a mass of 1,920 kilograms, and giving the entire shulker box a mass of 2,390 kilograms before we dye it. So far, when it comes to dyeing things, I've been using lapis lazuli, because, since it's a rock among flowers, it's a good bit heavier than most of the other dyes. Lots of people have asked if combining the lapis with another dye, like rose red, would add slightly more weight since there's more material. But when you combine dyes in Minecraft, you get 2 of the product. Meaning purple dye is half the weight of lapis lazuli plus half the weight of rose red, making it lighter than lapis lazuli. Since that one didn't go anywhere, another dye suggestion I've gotten is specifically cactus green. Since that's made of a whole cubic meter of stuff, and lapis is only 1/9 of one, maybe it's heavier. The cacti in Minecraft are saguaro cacti. This has always been the most likely candidate, the saguaro is the most cactus of any cactus, but recently, Minecraft cacti have even started growing saguaro flowers, so now there's no doubt. The estimated density of saguaro cactus flesh is 900 kilograms per cubic meter, which does make a cactus block heavier than the 322 kilogram blue dye, but cactus green is the product of smelting, a process known to remove insane amounts of water. And saguaro cacti are nearly 90% water by weight, meaning cactus green probably has a mass closer to 90 kilograms, so I'm still sticking with lapis. Putting everything we've covered together, if we take our sponges, fill each one to the maximum 118 blocks of water, name the stacks, place them in named blue bundles, place those in named blue shulker boxes, fill our inventory, put on the heaviest armor, grind to the maximum level, shoot Steve with 58 named arrows, and have 58 bees sting him, then, after accounting for the gravity of the Minecraft world, he would be lifting 53 sextillion, 891 quintillion, 783 quadrillion, 371 trillion, 570 billion, 258,151,844 kilograms, which is 528 zeta newtons, 118 sextillion pounds, and 45 quintillion, 2,500 elantras. Which is a little disappointing. I mean, sure, that is a lot, it's heavier than Pluto, but it's slightly less than the final weight we had 2 videos ago, and we don't go backwards here. So, to close off this video, what if we did one of the biggest and most popular suggestions I've gotten, the boat stack? A few times now, I've ended episodes of this series with a segment where I stop worrying about how much Steve can lift, and I instead look to how hard he can punch. I won't have time for that in this video, because I already had to cut parrots and bundles for time. I'll try and do both of those next time, subscribe to see that. But the punching calculation involved packing as much weight as I could into a boat. Most recently, that meant having a second player riding a pig in the back seat. And a lot of people have asked, what if I take those max weight boatloads and I stack them on Steve's head? First, let's optimize our boat a little. These folks all wanted me to name the pig for extra weight, so this is now Jimothy. Hope he finds his ping pong paddle. Now that Jimothy has a name and life purpose, we don't need him anymore, because while he was great for maximizing the weight of a single boat, when it comes to the boat stack, we want to pack as much weight as we can into as little height as possible, and Jimothy takes up too much space for how little he weighs. Sticking with 2 players in a boat, if we give them all the same stuff, that doubles the weight Steve was lifting before, and adds the mass of 2 players and of the boat, which is 1.25 acacia logs or 1,200 kilograms. That makes a single boat load, after accounting for gravity, weigh 90 quintillion 2,500 elantras. More importantly, for how many we can fit in our boat stack, a player in a boat, or 2 players in this case, is 1.4375 blocks tall. In Java Edition, the lowest the player's feet can be is at y equals -63, on top of the lowest layer of bedrock, and the highest a player's head can be is y equals 30 million. Any higher than that, and you get kicked out of the world. Steve is 1.8 meters tall, meaning there are 30,061.2 meters between the lowest a player's head can be, where Steve's is, and the highest their head can be. Dividing that by the height of the player boats, we find that theoretically we could stack 20,869,607 boats on top of his head. Steve wouldn't be able to jump with all that, or the top players would get kicked, but he can still do this. Leg day is important. Multiplying our boat load by our maximum number of boats, and adding back in the amount of weight that Steve is carrying on his person, we find that by recruiting 40 million of his closest friends, and 80 million more to shoot them with arrows, Steve can increase the maximum weight he can carry in vanilla survival Minecraft to 2 nonillion, 249 octillion, 400 septillion, 678 sextillion, 987 quintillion, 612 quadrillion, 523 trillion, 250 billion, 27 million, 124,294 kilograms. Which is 22.1 quatanewtons, that can't be a real word, 4.95 nonillion pounds, or 1.88 octillion, 2,500 elantras. Now we're getting into the real power of Steve, because we're done with baby stuff like deadlifting dwarf planets, we shot right past bench pressing planets, and now we're squatting stars. Because that's over 1/3 the mass of the Sun, 363 times the mass of Jupiter, and heavier than half the stars in the known universe. But, since I can never use enough units for you people, Steve's new lifting capacity is also 1.49 octillion 2024 Nissan Altimas, 57.7 quadrillion 3 gorgeous Dans, 1.67 octillion 2,700 elantras, 1.61 nonillion slightly obese female peregrine falcons, 1.43 octodecillion antineutrons, 1.02 septillion Saturn V rockets, 3.87 nonillion first print copies of Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, 265 octillion doges, 13 octillion average male scimitar oryx, 0.347 solar masses, 20.1 octillion quesos, 836 octillion Dell Latitude E5570s with half-full 12-ounce cans of Coke Zero, 116 septillion 1-meter cubes of tungsten, 662 octillion Mossberg 512-gauge shotguns, 66.2 octillion fully mature male golden retrievers, 1.07 nonillion Nintendo Wii U's with their gamepads, 38.8 octillion Rius Gremories, 2.23 quadrillion Killa Steve's Pantses, 2.47 Novemdecillion electrons, 1.39 octillion 2003 Infiniti G35 sedans, 223 sextillion Eiffel Towers, 116 septillion blocks of gold, 33 nonillion copies of Persona 5 Royal for the PlayStation 5, 187 octillion average male Pembroke Welsh Corgis, 11.2 decillion grains of sand, 26 octillion LG 4.5 cubic foot stackable smart front load washers in black steel with steam and Turbo Wash 360 technology, 2.22 septillion football fields of turf, 19.1 octillion Spyros the Dragon, or 45.1 nonillion DVD copies of Space Jam. I guess this is a thing I do now, so let me know what other units I should use in the comments. And while you're down there, I have another question for anyone still watching. There's a lot left to cover in this series, and so I have to ask, when something theoretically adds weight but falls in the more ambiguous side, should I count it? Like in this video, I counted bee stingers even though they never render, and our final number involves 120 million players sharing a single world, and getting 30 million blocks up in survival mode, and I don't even know if either of those things are really possible. So, should I stick to a more practical maximum weight where I don't count stuff like that, or should I find the theoretical maximum weight like I've been doing? Let me know. I realize I've already asked like 4 other questions in this video, but this one and the renaming thing are the 2 I really want feedback on. In the meantime, just know that Minecraft Steve is coming for Goku. And stay nice, everyone.